Hello, welcome to What We've Learned, episode 12. As ever, I'm joined by Shane. Hello, Shane.
Hi, Steve.
This is a very interesting one, Shane. If ever we needed to understand the power of marketing communication, or perhaps just a magic wand that we've managed to wave properly, it was only last episode that we finished by referencing people that we admire, one of those being Andrew Colwell. And lo and behold, I believe we can have Andrew Colwell with us today. Is that right?
We have. Yes, very excited, and we're both going to have a chat with him, which is super.
Well, let's just kick off and bring him in and hear all he has to say.
So, hi, Andrew. I'm really pleased that you can join us on this week's podcast, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Andrew Colwell, who's marketing director at Fleetsolve. Andrew is a qualified marketer and has been in the industry not quite as long, but almost as long as me. And I'm really happy he's going to share some of his thoughts about being a marketer in the current environment, as well as all the lessons he's learned in his career. So, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you very much, Shane. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to be asked, and I hope that I'll be able to add some value and a little bit of interest to the listeners.
So can you tell me a bit, Andrew, in terms of your role today as marketing director of Fleetsolve? I'm very aware you've worked both client side and agency side, but what is it that you do today, and how big is your team?
It's interesting because Fleetsolve it's been going for about 20 years. It's the UK's leading sustainability and carbon reduction specialist. So we do stuff like provide off-grid, low carbon, sustainable power and energy for big companies like all of the major supermarkets, prisons, hospitals, hotels, council buildings, that sort of stuff. And in Q3 last year, SIMEC, we became part of the SIMEC family. So at the moment, it's Fleetsolve, a SIMEC brand. SIMEC is one of the world's biggest producer of green energy, renewable energy. So they have massive big estates of solar, hydro, tidal, and obviously the biofuel, bioliquid side of things. That's where we come into the mix. So in terms of, it's the challenge really in general terms is it's a big B2B challenge. We have a big ticket product, as it were, which I'll possibly come on to a bit later, but it's a great opportunity but it's also a bit of an issue in the current times. And in terms of the team, we have a small team. It's only, count on one hand the size of the marketing team at Fleetsolve, but we have a broader central marketing resource within SIMEC. So we have a series of specialists in the communications team, in the brand team, in the direct team, in the strategic team, etc., that we can draw upon. All of the SIMEC businesses draw upon that central resource to get whatever we feel that we need at that particular time.
That's really interesting, Andrew, because I think one of the challenges, and it's often something that comes up when I go into companies consulting, or I know Steve also finds, is that when companies are acquired and you merge in, there's lots of challenges around, the team you've created and working as part of a new structure. How did you go about, if you like, trying to get the best from your central resource and working with them?
It's interesting. That's a really good question, Shane, because I've never worked in this sector previously. So I only joined the business at the start of this year. So probably, I think my the first week of February when I joined the business, which was interesting times to join in terms of what's just transpiring currently. But that whole challenge of even though SIMEC is a huge business, SIMEC, turns over $4 billion globally. So it's a big company. But in terms of that central resource, they don't have a big digital team necessarily. So one of the things that I've been asked to bring into the Fleetsolve business is a whole range of digital experience and digital modes of conduct or methods of doing things. So I've found that I've been able to lean upon central resource in a lot of things, but when it's come to digital marketing, it's been something that I've used my own experience and my own team and my own contacts, whether that be freelancers or agencies or other resource that I've developed over the years. And I've actually been able to introduce that to the wider SIMEC marketing team. And so they've been able to lean upon that and my own sort of digital experience specifically.
And Andrew, that sounds like very, very good timing for them as well as you, that digital, as Shane and I have spoken about on previous episodes, the transition to digital has been hugely accelerated by a lot of B2B markets because of the environment. Has that meant that, if you needed to, you were pushing on a very wide open door because you've got to keep the sales and marketing machine running, and digital is so front and center right now?
I didn't need to push on any door because there sort of wasn't a digital door necessarily to push open. It was, we do have a really good digital resource centrally, but it's currently, I think it's probably under-resourced. We've got one guy who's very good at what he does, but it's a big, wide company. And so I was given, thankfully, a level of autonomy that I was able to get things done quickly. And the reason for that, I suppose, as well, and this sort of is another point, but my CEO, my boss, Keith O'Connor, he's a big supporter of marketing. He's a very strategic guy, very sharp guy, but he really sees the value of marketing and is very inclusive with what marketing has to offer strategically within the business. So in that respect, it was quite easy to evidence what the true value was, what the capabilities of marketing were.
I think that's really interesting because it's come up on previous episodes of Steve's references that there's a bit of a crisis of confidence, and alluded it to last week when we were talking to Phil about the value of marketing. And it's fantastic you've got a stakeholder, in Keith, that really gets that. And you say you've been given freedom and to move at pace. I really like the fact you've referenced, if you like, you've got a blended approach. You've got your team, you've got central resource, you've got agency and previous, contacts. How do you manage that, Andrew? Because that's not an easy role.
No, it isn't. And, it feels like you're wearing many masks throughout one day, throughout an hour, really, let alone a day. But it's interesting because I know I've read some stuff and I've heard some stuff talked about the last 12 weeks or 14 weeks or so have been a bit of a crisis of confidence for marketers, but I don't see that personally. I see it wider, but I don't know whether it's totally true, because I think actually more than ever, I think that modern marketing, the modern approach to marketing, now is the time to really demonstrate its value. I think actually that the coronavirus, COVID-19, has allowed marketers to surface the tactical capabilities, but also not just the tactical capabilities, but to really evidence what the strategic value is. So being given that autonomy and, has been really valuable. In fact, after we did the whole crisis management piece, which I think every marketer, every business did at the start of this, I spent some time, probably about a 4 to 6 week period, sort of semi-on secondment to one of the wider GFG businesses to implement a digital marketing approach that was all about opportunity realization. So I should have explained at the front end. SIMEC is a big old business in its own right. It's 3.5 billion quid turnover, but SIMEC is a part of GFG, which is one of the largest privately owned companies in the world. I think GFG turns over about $20 billion. It's owned by Sanjeev Gupta. And one of the GFG businesses is Jahama Commercial Estates. And in the UK alone, they've got about 150 commercial properties. And a lot of those commercial properties were being mothballed as a part of coronavirus because, big manufacturing plants, cessation of business, big spaces available. And that was happening, which if you stand still and you look at that and you think, crikey, that's a big issue for our business. But if you flip it over and you think, okay, actually, we've got this huge real estate here that's not really doing anything at the moment, but equally in the market, aviation stopping, the auto industry stopping, manufacturing stopping. There's going to be a whole series of fleet literally on the road with nowhere to go. Lots of plant machinery, heavy equipment, nowhere to go. Where do these companies put this? At the time, I think National Coach had something like 17,000 vehicles not on the road. Where do they put that? So we did this whole digital marketing campaign where we looked at what the market was saying there and then, and the requirement in the B2B sector for storing all of these fleet and plant and machinery and tangible assets, and equally all of the space and the security and the sites and the UK network that Jahama had. So we pulled together a really quick, we did the old principles of marketing where we looked at audiences, we looked at decision makers, we looked at the channel, and we chose LinkedIn. We did a LinkedIn paid media campaign. We set up a campaign landing page, which was conversion optimized. We got the sales team behind it as well. And we started to generate some leads, and that was tactical. But Jahama would never had the opportunity to be in front of those people previously had we have not had this crisis to go at. So they got, as well as being in front of a lot of companies and big decision makers and stakeholders that they wouldn't have done previously, they started to generate business at a time when a lot of their commercial properties were just standing still, and that they were emptying at the very front end, the sharp end of this crisis, when people didn't know what was happening, even before the furlough scheme was being announced. It were tough times. So yeah, that opportunity realization, that whole digital approach, but that sort of agile approach, being fleet of foot about the whole thing, that was really important, and that was something that I was fortunately, with my experience, being able to bring to bear in a different part of the GFG business, and to a certain extent, it sort of showed and illustrated to the wider group, hey guys, look, this is what we can do.
That's an interesting story, Andrew. And again, actually, it harks back to previous episodes, and just to fill the previous week. If you look at this environment as a positive one, and of course, there are lots of negatives, I don't want to dismiss that, but it almost gives a chance for good marketing, problem solving, rapid. You use the word agile, that is often used, but isn't necessarily actually, the word is used, but it's not executed on. This, perhaps turn it on its head, it gives a chance for marketing to raise its game and its profile across many, not just the business, but by the sounds of it, many businesses within that group that you've got.
I agree, Steve. I think that, all of the standard stuff that you would expect, you have the whole crisis management piece, then you go into the comms piece, you've got internal communications, customer communications, stakeholder communications, and then you start to, once you've gone through that and you've set those schemes in play, then having the ability to sort of challenge the norm a little bit. You can either sit back and accept these things, or you can say, right, where's the opportunity here? And
I love the opportunity realization, Andrew. I think, for looking at that opportunity, I'm really intrigued, and sorry to jump in, but who else was in that team to make that happen?
Initially, there were three of us. There's myself, there was Keith O'Connor, who's my CEO at Fleetsolve, and there's a chap called Dilip Ortani, who's the chief exec of Jahama. And I think on one of the big calls, as it were, that Keith and Dilip are on with Sanjeev, this opportunity came up, and Keith, to be fair to him, he spotted the opportunity, and then it's thinking outside of your standard box, isn't it? We as Fleetsolve didn't have the ability to react to this market requirement. We knew the market requirement was there. Keith had spotted that it was there, and it was like, okay, but we do have other assets within the business that allows us to realize this opportunity. And then so it was, right, okay, you three guys, you go and make that happen. And we did, and we sort of, we pulled together the plan, and I went off and worked with my own marketing contacts, within initially with some guys in Fleetsolve, but then also using the external network that I've got. And then I brought it back to Dilip and his team and said, look, this is the plan, guys. If we're going to make this happen, we need to make it happen quickly, and this is how it's got to happen. And to be fair to them, they were saying, Andrew, that sounds good. It makes perfect sense. Let's go for it. And we did it really quickly. And, within a week, probably, we were having serious conversations, and with big major European bus companies, I can't say the names because of NDA, but huge, big, impressive brands, big sort of vehicle truck rental companies, massive people that business would never have spoken to previously, who are now have got them as customers and have got that dynamic relationship with them moving forward.
I think that's fascinating. I think that just finishing off on that gut feel, if you like, you know, that somebody's really close to the market. We've talked before about, you know, the value of data, the value of insight, but oh my goodness, you know, when you've got somebody who just sees an opportunity, and I'm sure you've got a comment on this too, Steve.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's great that I had two comments really, Andrew. One is, and this sounds a bit glib and it's not meant to, but you've got in Keith and the two CEOs, people that are obviously very forward thinking. This makes it sound like your job's easy, but there may well be people listening in saying, well, I haven't, as in my position as a senior marketer, don't have such a good seat at the table because my CEO or my board don't get marketing in the same way. So I wondered if you've got any thoughts for, well, how can, from your experience, how can marketing step up? How can it get that chance to talk? And then secondly, was really interested, although you can't name the brands, I think the really fascinating bit here is it sounds like you opened the door for opportunities that weren't there. Those brands that they're now engaged with, did they know your sister brand for what they do, i.e., yeah, we were aware, but we just hadn't thought of you? Or was it a case of introducing them completely from scratch at that pace as well? So they're solving a solution, you know, they're providing a solution that they never even knew existed.
So going back to your first question, in terms of, you know, if you haven't got a voice at the top table, there's a couple of things. Obviously, it helps if you're, you know, if the chief exec of a business is bought in, then that really helps. And it helps me. Personally, I'm lucky because, as Shane alluded to at the start, I'm a qualified marketer. You know, after I did my degree, I did my master's in marketing. So I get the strategic side of things, and that's good that you are perceived as somebody who can add genuine strategic value to a business, and that's good. However, even if neither of those two things are the case, marketing, it's not a God-given thing, really. You know, you've got to earn and demonstrate respect within a business. And so there are many ways that you can do that, but ultimately, you know, the value that marketing can deliver is going to be to the bottom line, ultimately. And if you can help directly or indirectly add value to the bottom line of a business, then people will they'll be forced to sit up and take note. So you can do two things. You can say, look, woe is me, I'm not being heard, and I get that, but whatever opportunity you are given, make it happen. You know, make it happen successfully wherever possible. Show your value, show what you can actually do, and just move up that food chain until you get to that ability where people are listening, or people not just listening, but they're asking you, hey, what do you think to this?
So you turn the tables, and I guess it's also talking their language, Andrew, as well. You know, we can get hung 100%. Up in our models, and as you say, as a qualified marketeer, you could spout out, the three of us could play a game of marketing bingo with all the frameworks and models, etc. But you got to recognise, if you're talking to the CFO, talk in their language rather than in marketing speak.
That's a really valid point, because I will answer your second question now, but the answer to that question is that we're just doing a campaign at the moment, which is about understanding our proposition versus the sales cycle and deconstructing what our proposition is. And when we've deconstructed our Fleetsolve proposition, we've understood that we've got three distinct audiences, and that whole language, that tone, the whole content piece, the visual communication piece, it's going to be very different. And that's because it will resonate more. So it's not just about targeting and getting the data aspect at the front end, but it's how do you speak to these people? You know, at which point are they, what's going to make them think this is for me? Actually, this is worth a conversation. I need to engage with these guys because they speak my language, they understand my challenge, and they've got a solution here that potentially we could have. So it's really important. It's a really valid point, Steve. I think in answer to your second question, in terms of, you know, when you were talking about did they previously have any relationship, then no, Jahama had no relationship at all with the people that they were in front of previously, because they actually have never adopted a direct sales approach previously. So they'd always gone through TPIs or third-party introducers. So they'd never had this direct sales approach. So not only was it a digital brand new for them, having a direct sales approach was brand new for them as well. So the companies that they had conversations with and the companies that they signed up, those companies had not heard of Jahama previously. So it was brand new relationships.
So a lot of change and a lot of experimentation, and all very fast. I think that, what have been the biggest challenges? If you introduce a direct approach, for example, the back end, if you like, and the actual onboarding is very different to when you do it through partners. So how did you go about that?
Well, from a marketing perspective, it was fairly straightforward, because I think it was more the back end, on the Jahama side of things, from a sales perspective, it was something that they weren't having to do. I suppose to a certain extent, they probably saw me as that third party introducer, if that makes sense. So I'm not part of their business. I'm sort of, parachuted in to help them realize this opportunity. So I'm a little bit of a TPI in their eyes. But, and again, they probably, if I'm being really honest, they probably thought, who's this guy? Exactly, who's this? We've never heard of him. He's literally only been with the company since February. What's he got to add to the, what
comes
he
in
bring
here
to
with
the
his
table?
marketing ideas.
Yeah, marketing. So it's sort of, but only then it was like, ping inboxes are, pinging with opportunity, and please, can you, voicemails are being left. Can you please ring me? I have this opportunity. I have this problem at the moment. So you earn respect, and then as you build that, you earn respect. So yeah, it's tough, but you've got to. I suppose the approach. It's a bit like moving back to Fleetsolve. Our challenge at the moment is quite different because of the coronavirus context. But we've all had to adapt. Not just marketing. The sales guys have had to adapt as well. And we've got to be a bit sort of more cunning with the way in which we go about, reducing sales cycles or having the right type of commercial model for the market at the moment. So yeah, there have been quite a few challenges that we've had to face, or currently are still facing up to.
So do you have a cunning plan then? I mean, I'm really fascinated to know the what next, Andrew. Because you've got, as you say, you've got the opportunity to experiment. You are doing different things. You can sometimes be a bit like a sort of, I'm not saying you, but marketers can be accused of being a bit like a sort of a kid in a sweetie box when we've got all of the digital stuff we can try. How are you focusing on your what next?
I think you're right. It's interesting because to a certain extent, currently you can't afford to fail because cash isn't that rich at the moment. However, now is exactly the time that you can actually try new things because it's time to challenge the norm at the moment, and you can be disruptive and you can adopt a different approach because people need that. That we're not in a normal context at the moment. So we're in a massively different scenario. Coronavirus has not just changed for the now, but certainly in our sector, it's going to change for years and years to come. We've got two things. We've got a product, as it were, or a solution, which is a big ticket amount. Okay, so these big combined heat and power off-grid units, they look like 3 porter cabins stitched together. That's how big they are, and they're filled with really innovative engines and great sustainability technology, and that's all cool. And it's locked into legislation. It's written into legislation that all businesses need to be, carbon zero or low carbon by the time 2030 comes, and that's great. And everybody, you probably saw at the start of this whole coronavirus crisis that, for the first time in a decade, there was an Indian village that could actually see the Himalayas.
Yeah.
We all saw that photograph. It went viral, and it was like, wow, emissions are way down. Look at what can be achieved here, guys. However, when you've got lots of businesses, as a result of the lack of trade, becoming cash poor, and they're furloughing staff, they're shutting down manufacturing, people can't fly, people can't travel, and people can't buy to a certain extent. People can't go to restaurants or can't go to bars, or they can't go to the high street. And I know that's about to change. But at the start of this, it's like, okay, so we've got a big ticket product here. So how we need to understand this market really quickly and understand how we can adapt really quickly. And we changed our commercial model. And I get the fact that you can't always do that, but we were able to do that, thankfully, because we're part of SIMEC and GFG, and we've got this, big thing behind us that left us in a position where we had that option to us. So, the sort of asset sale previously We would try and, we could be, I don't know, anything from selling a piece of equipment from £500,000 to 10.5 million quid, big money. But who's got that amount of money on their balance sheet at the moment? Not too many businesses. So we had to pivot our commercial model where we said, actually, do you know what, guys? You've got these assets in play yourself at the moment. We'll buy them from you. We can buy them and then we'll lease them back to you. So we can buy them and then lease them back on a much longer term contract at a fixed monthly amount for certainty. Then it gives them a cash injection up front. It takes the depreciating assets off their balance sheet, gives them long-term planning in terms of fixed price, and it gives us a recurring income model over a longer period of time, and it locks in our revenue streams. And that sort of pivot of how to change your commercial model has reduced what previously could have been more elongated sales cycles, because we've understood what the market required and we've increased the opportunities available to us, because that commercial model change has given us those big opportunities, and it's got us in front of people that previously potentially would probably say, hey guys, we know it's really important, this whole sustainability piece, this whole renewable energy piece, but actually let's just park that for 6 months because we're still firefighting here. But when we come up with a commercial model that allows us to help them with that firefight, then they listen immediately.
And Andrew, that's fascinating in terms of, you used agile earlier on, but for the organisation to rethink the commercial approach so quickly, I'd be interested, where's marketing's role in that? Is it a case of the same approach to communicating? Are you finding, and I'm finding with a couple of clients with my agency hat on, that they're having to spend a lot more time creating messaging and content that's actually not for marketing, but it's for sales, because the salespeople now need the materials in a different way. Where does marketing plug into that change, that pivot?
It's interesting that so the pivot commercially, obviously, that was driven by, I talked about Keith O'Connor before, and he's a sharp guy, very strategic guy, and he drove that pivot, that change. But then from that decision, then it's got to happen. So we've got, I don't know whether you've been on our website, fleetsolve.com, but it's the worst in the world. It's a terrible website, shocking. It's not fit for purpose, and it doesn't evidence anything about our business. So in terms of adapting, what we've had to also do in parallel with this sort of bigger ticket opportunity with pivoting the commercial model, we've also separately had to really put a laser-like focus on what our actual proposition is, but overlaid that against what the actual sales cycle is. And what I mean by that is, we have a full turnkey approach, bit of a cliche, but it is. We do sustainability consultancy, we do design, planning, we build things for people, we install them for them, we fuel them, and we maintain and service them. Okay, the whole shebang. We can give you a ready-made carbon reduction strategy, and that's all great. However, that takes a while to get things off. That could be 12 months, that could be 18 months. But by looking at that proposition, say, look, can we deconstruct this? What can we do that gives us here and now revenue, here and now leads, here and now business opportunities? And when we looked at the engineering team that we've got, the maintenance and the servicing facility and capability that we've got, we've now productized that as a separate entity. And so in terms of where marketing fits, what we're about to do within, a couple of weeks tops, we'll have a big UK-wide campaign going out there talking about very distinctly those two different propositions, the big ticket stuff and the here and now immediate sales opportunity. So we've identified some target audiences, we've identified a channel, and going back to the horrific website that we've got, which I'm glad to say I have no hand in whatsoever.
Andrew, I was a fan of the 90s as well, don't we?
You're lucky if it was the 90s, Steve, if I'm being honest. I think it was more 1983 last time I looked. I try not to. But so yeah, look, we're looking at things like campaign landing pages and developing them into microsites, which have got quite different tones of voices depending upon the audience. So to your point earlier, Steve, about, understanding who your audience is and having a different type of voice and message and content, absolutely. And we're trying to do some stuff. I know Paul Cash, who you both know well, he talks a lot about humanizing in B2B. And that's so important, because within within the engineering sector and within the energy sector, if I see another picture of an engine, it would drive me mad. Honestly, it's disastrous marketing.
So
It's
again,
like,
you've got your own stock photo bingo
oh,
that can go on within
oh,
your sector. Yeah.
Shane, it drives me mad. Okay. And, when I was having the conversations and discussions before I joined the business with Keith, I said, look, you've got to be ready for the change I'm going to try and deliver here, because we're going to do things very differently and we're not going to look like anybody else. And we are going to stand out. We're going to get some cut through, and we're probably going to upset a few people along the way, if I'm being really honest. But I don't mind that, because as you alluded to earlier, Shane, we've worked together previously in years gone by, and the whole market disruption piece gets you somewhere quite quickly.
It does. Yeah. And I think on that, Andrew, I think that just on that point, it's really, I love the fact you warned your stakeholders that you want them to be brave up front. It didn't come as a shock to them. And I think you also used the words earlier on in the chat about being seen within the business as a trusted partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder to what extent that comes perhaps from the fact that you've also worked agency side previously in your career, and that that's how agencies, if they work brilliantly, they are a trusted partner. Do you think that lens that you bring to it, that's helped?
100%. Oh, 100%. The fact I'm lucky enough to have worked client side, agency side, and it's really helped because to a large extent, within the SIMEC and GFG organization, I'm still working agency side to a certain extent, because albeit I'm very client focused on Fleetsolve, I'm still trying to help other parts of the business, and people see you differently. They don't see you as an employee within their parts of the world. They see you as an external entity. And so, you're right, Shane, 100% right. I think having that agency experience, it's a massive help when you work client side.
I think
or vice versa, I guess, as well, Andrew. That we sitting with I started client side, I'm now agency side. And it alludes back to actually something you've been talking about without talking about it, is that you're dealing with a situation now, but you've had decades of readiness for this. So the more rounded a marketeer can be, if they've worked agency, I think they make a great client side person, and vice versa. But you're pulling back on your not just your qualifications, but you've solved some of these problems before, I suspect. Maybe they haven't got the same name, and certainly not quite in the way that we're having to deal with now. But there's no substitute for experience on coming with ideas that are going to prove to work, because they've been there, done that, got the balloon and the t-shirt, dare I say.
No, you're right, Steve. Experience does help, of course it does. But it's interesting because it's sort of, I have got a fair bit of experience, but the reality is that, the last 12 to 14 weeks of probably in a very sort of restricted period of time, those sort of 3 months or so have given me more experience than I've probably had in the last 3 years. But you've got to learn from it. And we talked about being agile and adapting quickly and learning quickly. And it's really important to actually sometimes to not just be tactical, but to sit back, and the value of being able to think and the value of being able to think strategically is really helpful. And I suppose that comes with a bit of, as you get older and more experienced, you're not just sort of operating all the time with knee-jerk reactions and being tactical. Sometimes you think about the bigger picture sometimes. Then it does give you the opportunity to learn quicker and to probably fail less often. You still fail from time to time, but you probably do it less often.
I think that's a great point about that. I'm so passionate, as you know, about time to think. And in a funny sort of way, we've had to think because the situation's so different. And to start with, we were being given permission to spend more time thinking. And I think one of the things that I've taken from just, chatting to you today is your approach to deconstructing the problem. In other words, the innovation you've done, it's still with existing products and services, but you have, as you say, you've broken them down into, well, how do we approach it differently with what we've got to suit what the customer needs? And I think that thinking that through is something that everybody can take away from this episode, because I think it's something I don't see happen enough. And that breaking down, is it? Do you do it in a workshop, Andrew, or is there a particular approach you take to this deconstruction?
It's interesting that because people talk about, you read a lot about everyone's working from home, or a lot of people are working from home in an office environment, certainly. And before this hit, we were 2 weeks away from 3 weeks, perhaps, moving from a big 2,500 square foot place to a 21,500 square foot place, like big plans for growth. And now we've had to change, and people talk about, well, we're working from home, you don't get that water cooler opportunity. Everyone talks about the water cooler moments and that sort of little, those sort of undiarized opportunities. However, the other side to that coin is when you do think about these opportunities, and when you say you can act quickly, I'll have, a one-to-one on Teams with Keith, and we communicate daily, and I would never have had that opportunity previously. And because you have that one-to-one communication opportunity, you can get more out of it because it's undivided attention. And you don't have people, I previously have sat in Keith's office and said, hey, what do you think about this? And he said, Andrew, what do you think about that? And we've chatted some, but then people will say, oh, can I have your attention for this, please? Can I have your decision on that? And it's you're a little bit sort of distracted, both of us. But now it's this one-to-one opportunity. We can get things done really quickly. Decisions can be made quickly, or discussed opportunities can be discussed, and decisions can be made quickly. And we can move ahead quicker than we probably ever would have done previously.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. You've given us so much to think about. That was an amazing chat and so many learnings. I think really that time to think, particularly, using the time you have with your senior stakeholders and deconstructing our services and products into new ones. Oh my goodness, so many takeaways. What about you, Steve?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And firstly, before we forget, Andrew, happy birthday to you. He's done this for us on his birthday. I'm sure it was on his wish list of things to do, is to come and inspire us with thoughts. I really like the idea that it's particularly right now, it's very easy to be reactionary, just get on with things, be a busy fool with marketing. But that need to stand back and to think and to reflect and then go hard, press the accelerator on getting that communication out, particularly as Andrew's referenced so well, when you've got a product as complex and as expensive as his, which a lot of B2B markets fall into that category, recognizing that you've got those different stakeholders, that whether it's introducing them for the first time, as he talked about with the coach and the bus industry, or whether it's just repointing the way you previously would have commercially sold something. It's that think first and do second that's so important, Shane.
Yes, and I hope this spurs lots of conversation over on the LinkedIn channel, where I know Andrew's very active and will join the conversation. And I hope people put their own perspective on this, maybe around some of the challenges that they've had, or whether anything that Andrew has said has inspired them, because this is a broadcast medium, but we really do enjoy the post-podcast chat that goes on a different format too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it inspires us, Shane, in terms of, as we've seen, as we started this podcast with, if we reference people and observations on issues and areas we want covered, lo and behold, we can find really interesting people to bring out in future episodes. So, Shane, thanks ever so much for that. I think we'll leave it at that. Andrew, thank you again, although he's had to leave us to eat birthday cake. I'm sure we toast him from here. And thanks everyone for listening in. We look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.